right, so today we are going to talk a little bit about discipleship, okay? But I'm going to do it a little bit differently, okay? Because let me ask you this. What if I made the phrase at Rockfish and I said, we exist to, what would you say? Let's do it again. We exist to. There you go, okay? That's correct. Fully committed followers of Jesus. Okay, make. What does that mean? Make. Okay, make disciples. The whole thing is making disciples. And today we're going to talk about discipleship. So my background is I grew up and my parents were navigators. And navigators are big into discipleship. Verse memory, all of these different types of things. And they had all of these structures around discipleship. This is how you disciple someone. Okay? Not bad things. They're just things to hold what God is doing. Okay? You have people who, movements that'll say, okay, discipleship. Jesus discipled people, and so he had 12 disciples, so we need to have 12 in our group, and he had 3 in the internal group, his closest friends, and so we're going to have groups of 3, and it's not a bad thing. It's just a form, okay? And so actually, we did a conference last week, and Jeff and I spoke at it, and I remember the next slide, Jeff made a comment. Okay, here is what he said. He said, discipleship is not programmatic. It's not a curriculum. It is not tools. Okay, it's not tools. It's not a curriculum. It's not programmatic. Okay, what did he mean? Well, let me interpret what he means, because Jeff and I use different words. So let me try to show you, okay, or tell you what I think Jeff was saying, okay? What he was saying was methodologies are like diapers. They need to be changed or you'll have a big mess. You hear that? Methodologies are like diapers. They need to be changed or you'll have a big mess. I love the verse in the Bible that talks about wine and wineskins. And that is actually a translation of that verse. It's Norman's translation of that verse. That verse says, don't get attached to the wineskin. Okay, the wineskins aren't where the life of God is. The methodologies aren't where the life of God is. The programs aren't where the life of God is. Okay, when we get attached to the methodologies, to the programs, to the way to do things, guess what happens? We lose the wine and there's a big mess. It spills all over the floor because the wineskin bursts. Well, methodologies, okay, are like diapers. They need to be changed or you'll have a big mess. Okay, so let's talk about discipleship. So discipleship, the root word, okay, is not, okay, if you thought about discipleship, let's start with this. If I said, okay, what is discipleship? I think a lot of people would answer it's about teaching. It's about teaching people, okay? It's teaching people to follow Christ, okay? Well, here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that in the Bible, the Greek word for disciple, the root of that word is not teach. It's learn. Disciples are learners. When Jesus said, go make disciples, I think what he meant was, go make learners. Go intentionally go to people and give them a reason and a desire and a want to follow Christ. By the way, we're having problems with the slides, so that's okay. I'll just keep going, okay? And I kind of even looked in the Bible. I always try to, if I'm doing a topic, I'll go search. All of the words disciple in the Bible. Every word for disciple in the Bible. Okay? And you know what I found? Is disciple exists a lot in January. Wow, my brain is not working. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts. And guess what? It does not exist after that. The word disciple in the Bible is not in any of the epistles. None of them. And I asked, why? Well, let me imagine with me. The disciples had a meeting, okay? Paul went there and said, guys, we have a problem. So he went to Jerusalem. This is not in the Bible, by the way, but I think it happened, okay? He went to Jerusalem. He says, we have a problem. People are starting to gather into these groups of people, and they say things like, I follow Paul, or I follow Apollos. I'm a disciple of Apollos. I'm a disciple of Paul. And he says, we are not disciples of Paul or Apollos. We are disciples of Jesus. He said, let's get rid of the word. The problem is the word. And so from that point on, in the Bible, they got rid of the word disciple. You like that? I don't know if it happened, but I do think there's something in it. Okay? Because there's a verse in the Bible in Acts that says they were no longer called disciples, they were called Christians. It's like they're not just disciples, they are followers of Christ. And I think that's what that word means. Okay? So, discipleship is not something we do. Discipleship is not something we do. It's a lifestyle. Okay? It's not a bunch of programs and whatever. It's a lifestyle. Discipleship is who you are. When you disciple someone, you be who you are, which is Christ in you. Okay? So, the best discipler that I know is in this room. Okay? I want to describe this. Okay, when you are at the YMC and you walk into the wood shop. Anybody walk into the wood shop every once in a while? The YMC? When you walk into the wood shop and Emil is there and he's working, what happens? Emil stops. He sits down at the table. He says, would you like some coffee? Remember, coffee is a core value of Rockfish. Okay? Says, would you like some coffee? And he sits there and talks with you and asks you questions about life and what's going on. Let me tell you this. You may not think it is, but that's discipleship. That is discipleship. And I have learned so much from Emil in doing that. And I am challenged by it because I don't do that. I'm too busy. I'm too busy to just sit down and talk with people. Okay? So if you looked at the Bible and I said, what is the discipleship verse in the Bible? Okay? Most people would say Matthew 28. Go make disciples, right? Go, yes. I don't think so. Let me tell you some of my favorite verses for discipleship, okay? John 33. I must decrease, he must increase. That's called discipleship in somebody's life. They find Jesus, Jesus is in them, and you say, you know what, I'm going to decrease in your life. Jesus is going to increase in your life. It's not going to be about me. It's going to be about Jesus. That's a discipleship verse. That's a discipleship verse. What's another verse? Okay? Acts 17:11. I love this one. The Bereans were of more noble character than the Thessalonians, for they investigated daily to see if what the disciples said was true. What did they do? They were learners. They were so intrigued by the gospel that they opened their Bible and searched for what was the disciples, was it really true? Was what the disciples said was true? Those were real disciples, okay? But let me tell you my absolute favorite verse for discipleship, and if you know me for very long, I'll say this verse a lot, okay? It's 1 Thessalonians 2:8. It says, we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. So let me give a formula. Love plus the Bible plus life equals discipleship. That's what that verse says. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel, the Bible, the good news, but we wanted to spend life with you. We wanted to spend life with you. Okay? So, what is discipleship and what does it look like? Discipleship can look a lot of different ways. Discipleship can, believe it or not, discipleship can look like basketball. If you're doing it with the right intent to connect with people and after the game start talking with them and asking questions, that's discipleship. It can be my favorite thing, which is go to Starbucks together. Sit down, talk, and have coffee. Yes. Guess what? Done in the right way, that's discipleship. Okay? Done in the right, going on vacation with people. Sitting down and having dinner together and talking about what God is doing in your life is discipleship. Okay? So, this is what discipleship is not. Next slide. Have you ever heard the term mini-me? Right? People talk about it. I want this is my mini-me. You know, your kid, and they look just like you. They act just like you. They say the same words. They talk in the same way. This is my mini-me. You know what people think discipleship is sometimes? I want my mini-me's around. These are my disciples, my mini-me's. They think just like me. They agree with me on everything. When you see them, you think you're seeing me. That's not discipleship. Discipleship is not about making somebody look like you. What is discipleship about? There you go. I knew somebody would say it. Thank you, Joe. Look like Jesus. It's not my mini-me. Let me show you my mini-me, okay? Not my disciple mini-me, but you guys know Rebecca? All right, that's Rebecca. All right? When she was younger. Well, the reason I'm showing this is because I want to, look at that smile, by the way. Huh? Doesn't that look just like my smile? No, here's the deal. Rebecca was a mess sometimes. Guess who was a mess? Most of the time. Okay? But here's the deal. Children and the way that they learn. Who are the best learners in the world? Children. Children. When they're born and they get a year old, then they start learning language and then they start talking. It's amazing how much they learn and how they're sponges for information. Okay? They are learners. So I think we need to learn from them. So here's the thing. What is the first word a child will say? Dada. Dada, mama. You know what that is? Relationship. Okay, discipleship is all about relationship. Okay? Discipleship is about relationship. A child that learns, the first thing that needs to happen is they need to build a relationship with the people they're going to learn from. You hear that? The first thing a child needs to do is build a relationship with the people that they're going to learn from. Apply that to discipleship. Start with relationship. Second word that they learn, and they'll say it a lot, is no. No, 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 no. You know what they start getting? They start saying, I can think for myself, and everything you say, I'm going to disagree with that sometimes because I am trying to figure it out. No, no, no. Here, do this. No. You hear that word over and over and over again. Okay? In discipleship, okay, it's partly about letting the person struggle and say, no, I don't understand. I'm not sure that that's true. That's okay in discipleship. I want them to struggle. I want them to think, so let them say no. What's the third word? And it gets used more often than no and drives parents crazy. Why? Why? You say, and you answer the question. They say, why this? And you answer the question with a very, very clear answer. And what do they say in response? Why? That is the best word of a disciple. That is the best word of a disciple is why. You want to teach people to struggle and say why. Why is that true? Because you know what? Those are learners, okay? So there's this thing in the U.S. called fly fishing, okay? Fly fishing, you go to a river, not to a lake or whatever. The water is running, and you go fly fishing, okay? And let me tell you what happens when you go fly fishing. If I sent you out to go fly fishing on your own and said, here is how you do it, and I gave you a list, and you went out there to do it, there is no way you would catch any fish, and you wouldn't figure it out. Okay? It doesn't work. To learn to fly fish, you have to go with someone who knows how to fly fish. And they sit next to you, and they show you how to do put out your thing, the lure, and when to pull it back at the right time, and when the fish grabs it, you need to yank it back, and then you still don't know how to fly fish, okay? But as you're doing it, you're sitting there talking with this person who is teaching you, and you're building relationship. Fly fishing is about relationship, okay? So you sit there, next slide, by the way. You sit there and you do this. And eventually, when you do it, you learn how to fly fish. True discipleship is a fly fishing trip, not a trip to the market. It's not going to the market and saying, here's the fish, go buy the fish. It's living life with people. It's doing it together. It takes time. These are all discipleship, okay? Next slide. Let me tell you, A lot of management courses will use concepts like this. Great management is not about getting others to implement your idea. Instead, the art of getting others to believe the idea was theirs. Discipleship is the same way. You don't want to go, and when you're discipling someone, you don't want to go teach them all the answers. No, you want to ask the questions and get them to find the answers. And when they find the answer, if they find it, it's their answer. Now, you may know the answer, and that's okay. And you may direct them towards the answer, but let them find the answer. That's discipleship. That's discipleship. That will create fully committed followers of Christ. Getting practical, okay? So when you are with someone, and by the way, I'm going to ask this question. Okay? How many people in here are actively discipling someone else? Raise your hands. Actively discipling someone else. Is Emil raising his hand? Yes, he is. Okay. Okay. All right. A majority of this room is not involved in active discipleship, but I think the reason why is because you misunderstand what discipleship is. Okay? Number one, when you're with someone, ask open-ended questions. Don't give answers. Ask questions they have to think about. Ask questions that will get them to think. I like to create struggle in people. You will know when I speak. A lot of times I will say things that people go, huh? Why? Because I want you to think. Ask open-ended questions. Don't answer all the questions. We love to hear ourselves speak. We love to provide everybody else the answers. That's not discipleship. Okay? It's to give them, don't always leave room for their questions. Okay? And in that, they will learn. Point them to the right verses. I'm not saying don't answer any questions. I'm just saying give them the ability, okay, to do that. Okay, allow room for different thoughts. You know what's the one thing that shuts down discipleship faster than anything else? Is when they have a thought, and it might be different than what you think, and you shut it down as the leader. And you say, well, no, let me show you. And now 17 verses, and this is what it means, and all of that. And all of a sudden, the person who is trying to learn goes, oh. They learn not to ask questions. They learn not to ask questions. Allow room for different thoughts. Jeff has a concept that says we hold things open-handed. There's certain things that are tight. Salvation by grace alone in Christ. We hold that tight. There's a lot of things, ways to interpret verses. We hold them loose. It's okay for people to have different opinions, even if you're discipling them. Share real life stories. You know what's the best discipleship? And we'll get into this more as your life. Okay? Share with them what God is doing in your life. That's discipleship. Don't draw conclusions. This is the same thing as don't answer every question. Let them draw the conclusion. This is about them believing they found the answer. I say speak in parables. The reason I say this is because look at what Jesus, the best discipler in the world, and he kept saying parable, 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 and then they would ask questions, and you know what he would do? He would answer with another parable. Well, thanks a lot, Jesus. Why? Because he wanted them to think. He wanted them to question. So when I'm saying use, even if you don't have life experiences, use what-if questions. Say, what if this happened? How would you respond to that? What if so-and-so asked you this question? What would you tell them? What would you tell them? That's discipleship, okay? Be safe when others are sharing. Be safe. They need to feel like they can share anything with you and it not shock you. Be safe, okay? If you aren't safe as a discipler of somebody else, you won't get much chance to speak into the lives of people, okay? Next one, be the disciple. Next slide. Matthew 13:52, okay? Says, he said to them, therefore, every teacher of the law, the Pharisees, every person who knows everything, teaches the law, they're the teachers, who becomes a disciple in the kingdom of heaven. So the teachers who knew everything then became disciples in the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his storeroom new things as well as old. All right, so I do this thing, and I take verses, and I like the NIV, but I like my NIV better. Norman's International Version, okay? All right? Here it is, Norman's International Version. Therefore, every discipler who thinks they know it all and then becomes a true disciple of Christ will suddenly realize they don't know much and have a lot to learn. You hear that? Every discipler who thinks they know it all and then becomes a true disciple of Christ will suddenly realize they don't know it all and has a lot to learn. When we know it all, we're not a good discipler. We need to understand we don't know it all, okay? Life as the ultimate teacher, okay? I actually believe the primary method of discipleship is actually your life. It's who you are, okay? So life as a teacher, think about it. Think about Jesus using life as a teacher. He would go, and he intentionally went up on the hill, and there were 5,000 people there, and he started preaching, and he went way long, and everybody was hungry, and the disciples came back and said, we need food for everybody. What are we going to do? He used life experiences as a discipler. If he had gone there and said beforehand, listen, guys, everybody's going to be hungry. Let's cook food. Let's bring that food. The life lesson would have never happened, okay? Use life as a teacher. He sent them with nothing. He sent them by twos with nothing and said, here, go to these towns. Why? Because life is the best teacher. I bet you when they came back, they had lots of teaching experiences with Jesus. Lots of teaching experiences with Jesus, okay? Next slide, by the way. And next slide. Catch up with me. All right, real discipleship happens in the mess of life. Anybody here have a messy life sometimes? Anybody here have a messy life? You know what? That is God preparing you to disciple other people. Life happens in a messy life. Your messy life and their messy life, okay? So why, if you think about this, okay, we use this phrase, we were joking about it in the pastor's conference. It happened a couple of times where they were talking about, what was it? Praying for patience. Praying for patience. Don't pray for patience. Don't do it. You know why? If you're not patient, don't pray for patience, because you know how God teaches you patience? He puts things in your life that are really difficult and you have to be patient. That's how he teaches you. So if you really want patience, be willing for God to do some things in your life to teach you patience, okay? If you want to be able to love other people really well and you ask God to teach you to love other people, do you know what he's going to do? He's going to bring a bunch of people in your life that are very, very, very difficult to love. Why? Because that teaches you how to love people. That teaches you how to love people. Lessons come in the form of storms in our life. Lessons come in the form of storms. Let me give you the illustration. Jesus on the boat. He sends his disciples out. They get on the boat. They're rowing away, and suddenly the storm comes, and the boat's going crazy, and Jesus is asleep. He's asleep. And they go wake him, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're all going to drown. And he calms the waves. So I have a question for you. First of all, why didn't Jesus, before he got onto the boat, tell them, hey guys, just so you know, if a storm comes, I'm over the storms. I can calm the storms. Don't be afraid. No, because their fear was actually a teaching mechanism for Jesus. He was discipling them through life experience. Okay? Real discipleship happens in the mess of life. Well, you know what I think, by the way? I think in Norman's International Version, it says Jesus was asleep, but he really wasn't asleep. He was pretending he was asleep. Why? Because he wanted to teach him a lesson. Did he know the boat was going crazy and the waves were coming and he was getting all wet? I don't know. I just have a feeling that Jesus was like, you know what? This is going to be a good teaching experience. I'm going to pretend like I'm asleep. Because real discipleship happens in the mess of life. Okay? the best definition of discipleship ever, okay, came from one of our missionaries who, when you meet him, you go, there's no way that he's going to have the best definition of discipleship, because Ben Wong doesn't have a lot of words all the time. But there's one time, Ben runs a home in Tacloban for boys, okay, street boys that come and live with him. And I asked him, I said, because he's talking about discipleship, and I say, Ben, how do you disciple them? Next slide, please. Okay? It says, we live life together. When things happen, we go upstairs and we talk about it and see what the Bible says about it. Whoa. Ben, you've got it. That's discipleship. We live life together. When things happen, we go to Starbucks, we sit down, we have relationship, we talk about what happened, and we talk about how God views that. That is discipleship. Okay? That's discipleship. Does your life, this is a tough question, by the way. Next slide. This is a tough question. I want you guys to ask yourself this question. Does your life cause others to want to learn more about Jesus? Does your life cause others to want to learn more about Jesus? Does your life cause other people to want to learn? Because that's how you go make learners. Look at your life and decide, when they look at your life, does it something they want to ask questions about? Okay? In the mess of life, do they want to ask you questions? Let me tell you about 5 people really quickly that discipled me. But I don't remember one thing they taught me with words. Not one. Okay? One was my youth pastor, okay? And he taught a lot, and I probably learned a lot from him, but I couldn't pick out one thing. But you know what taught me? His name was Dave Busby, okay? Dave Busby was the oldest living cystic fibrosis patient in the U.S. at the time. He's like 40 years old. He died at like 47 or something like that, okay? He was the oldest living cystic, so his lungs would fill up. And he couldn't breathe, and he couldn't talk sometimes. And you have to go into the hospital. But you know what, Dave had an intimate relationship with Jesus that you would not believe. And you know what, seeing Dave's life, Dave also had polio when he was younger. One of his legs was shorter than the other, little skinny thing. He would walk around, and he couldn't run, and he couldn't. But you know what, those experiences, Dave Busby would share about his youth. And when he would get teased, and he talked about when he go to the gym and he's lifting weights and everybody's looking at that scrawny guy over there and what that did inside of him and his relationship with Jesus. You know what it made us want to do? It made us want to learn about Jesus. Pete Walters, big football guy. You got Dave Busby and Pete Walters next to each other. He was an ex-football player in the U.S. Big, huge linebacker, okay? I have so many stories about Pete. But I tell you what, let me tell you the discipleship moment Pete had in my life that I still remember today. We went to go buy a computer for him. He had wanted a computer, a Macintosh computer, forever. And he's like, finally, there was this sale at this place called Comb Electronics. And he's like, Norman, let's go. Let's go. So we go down to Comb Electronics and we stand. And by the time we get there, they were going to give 100 computers, okay, and they were going to sell it at super, super, super cheap. Okay, so we had to get there early. We got there early, and there were already 250 people in line. It's like, oh my gosh, we're not going to get a computer. We're sitting there. He's like, oh, this is going to work. This is going to work. And then all of a sudden, 8 o'clock comes, and the doors open. Okay, now, you would think people have been standing there for hours and hours and hours. Everybody would stand in line and wait. Now, you wouldn't understand this in the Philippines, but that's how it would work in the U.S., okay? You stand there and wait. You know, what happened was everybody rushed the door. And Pete is looking next to me, and he looks at me, and he goes, let's go. So we run to the door. We get in there, and guess what? Pete gets a computer. We are so excited. We go home. He's in there setting up his computer, getting it all set. He's wanted this computer for a year. And then God starts to knock on his heart. And he comes out to me, and he says, Norman, I shouldn't have this computer. There were people in front of me in line that should have gotten this computer. And God won't let me let it go. We've got to go back. So here we are, we get in the car, we drive back down to this place, we go in and the salesperson's there and he says, I have to return this computer. They're like, why? And he says, because I jumped the line. And the guy's like, that's okay, don't worry about it, everybody else did. And he says, no, I can't. God's teaching me a lesson. I need to return this computer. Real discipleship happens in the mess of life. Real discipleship happens when we screw up. Other people see how we screwed up, and then we show them how Christ in us won't let us do that. He discipled me. Pastor Ramil in Tondo. John knows, there's a few others in here that may have met Pastor Ramil. Pastor Ramil loved people like no one I've ever seen. He loved people in Tondo. He would sit in the jeepney. He would see these little kids jump on the back, riding and hiding from the jeepney driver, and he knocks. He says, "That was me. That was me." He's in the hospital. He just had surgery. He had cancer. Okay, and he's praying for people around the room. As a pastor, going and putting hands on them. He had his IV bag, walking over to the table. He just had surgery yesterday and praying for people. And I learned from Pastor Ramil. Then he prays for one person, says, what can I pray for you? You know what the person says? They say, I don't have money to get out of the hospital. Can you pray for money? That God would provide me with money so I can get out of the hospital. Pastor Ramil starts praying, and God starts knocking. He says, Pastor Ramil, you have money in your pocket. So Pastor Ramil, obedient, pulls money out of his pocket, hands it to him. As Pastor Ramil was telling this story, his wife Jenny was there. And she says, I was so mad at him. I told him, we don't have money to get out of the hospital. He taught me about discipleship. He not taught me about discipleship. He discipled me through his life. Okay? My dad discipled me, but not in a teaching way. I'll tell you, the most powerful lesson I learned from my dad is how as he got older, he softened. As he got older, he figured out what most people don't figure out, which is they don't know it all. I had this phrase with my kids. It says, my kids would just, once they get to be 18, they think they know everything. Right? Any parents in here know that? They know everything. You can't tell them anything. Our phrase would be, it's what you learn after you know it all that really counts. It's what you learn after you think you know it all that really counts. Okay? My dad taught me that. My dad taught me to love people more as you get older. I say you have two different types of old people. Right? Some that get harder, more set in their ways, more legalistic, more whatever. Some you get more loving, more graceful, more whatever. My dad discipled me on how to grow old. Okay? Weaknesses. Next slide. Weaknesses, difficulties, persecutions, hard times is what makes a great disciple maker. Why? Because they no longer believe they have all the answers, but they know who does. They know who does. Jesus does have all the answers. God, I may not understand them, but you know what? In your hard times, God can use that to mold you into someone that can impact other people, and that is discipleship. Okay? How do you teach? How do you teach other people? Okay? I have this phrase. How do you teach? How do you teach? With words? Or with your life? Because I think discipleship is about sharing life with other people. Remember the verse? Remember the verse? So we loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Start teaching people with your life as opposed to with words. Okay? Next slide. And this is where I really want to speak to people in this room. Okay? Which is if we make discipleship only about teaching. Teaching, by the way, is a gift. God gives people a gift of teaching. People with other gifts like encouragement, servanthood, faith, hospitality, mercy feel like they're not qualified to disciple others? I'm going to guess that there's a lot of people in this room who say, I can't disciple other people because I'm not a teacher, because I don't know a lot, and I'm not able to do that, okay? So I have a question. If you're a great encourager, then encourage others, and they will learn how they can encourage others. That's discipleship. That's discipleship. If you're good at showing mercy, then in showing mercy, they will learn how to show mercy to others. Remember what I said about Pastor Emil? He showed me love. Therefore, I learned to love. Right? Every Christian, every person who has Christ in them has the capacity to disciple others. You hear that? Every Christian, because you know what I know? If Christ is in you doing stuff, if he's alive and active in you as a Christian, doing stuff, even the smallest thing, you can start using that in your life to have a piece of discipleship in somebody else. Okay? So when I ask the question that says anybody in here is actively involved in discipleship, I'm going to tell you this. Most of the people in this room could raise their hands if they started intentionally thinking about what are the things God is doing in my life, my weaknesses, my hard times, my difficulties, my triumphs, my everything, and said, can I use those to encourage somebody else in their life? Can I spend my time, this is my struggle, can I sacrifice my time to spend with somebody else just talking about life? Just talking about life. And how God is in that, okay? Discipleship can look so different in different cases, okay? You have people who are great disciplers and what they do is teach. Great. That's good. That's one way. But there's other people that can disciple in other ways. The best tools for discipleship. The best tools for discipleship. So I just kind of started looking at and saying, okay, what are some ways that we disciple others? And I've talked about some of these, okay? Number one, questions. Questions. Ask questions, don't give answers. Ask questions of other people. Ask questions that get them to think. Ask questions about who they think Jesus is. Ask questions, lots of questions. Silence. Sometimes just being there with them will disciple them. Are you willing to just sit with them in the middle of a crisis and be with them? Because I do believe that is a piece of discipleship. I believe that is what God called us to do and wants us to do. Your time. Your time. This is my big one. So keep up with me on the slides there. Your time. Okay? Your time is your best discipleship tool. Are you willing to spend time intentionally discipling other people? Next one, your humility. Don't think you know it all. I struggle with this one too. You got to be honest, right? I like to have the answers. Sometimes it's hard for me to be silent. It's hard for me to let other people ask the questions. But I need to do that. If I'm going to be a good discipler, I need to learn to do that. Okay? Your scars. Big one. Big one. Are you willing, here's the thing, and I struggle with this one as well. Are you willing to let the scars in your life make disciples of other people? Are you willing to be transparent? Are you willing to be open? Are you willing to share your life with them? Are you willing to not pretend everything is okay in your life and really share with them, hurt with them? That's discipleship. Your scars are part of discipleship. Your weaknesses. Isn't that weird? How do you disciple someone else? God can use your weaknesses to disciple them. I was discipled by Paul, who said, he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. That is why I boast about Christ. Can you do the same thing in your weaknesses? Can you admit to other people that you have weaknesses? What about your ears? A great discipleship tool is listening. Really listening to what other people say. Use your ears. They're a discipleship tool. Next one, the messiness of life. I already talked about that. God's given you the opportunity, if you have a messy life, to disciple other people through it. Okay? And over all of that, it's your life. It's your life, it's your life, it's your life. That's how you're going to disciple others. Let me end with this, okay? We're 2 slides. Discipleship, love plus the gospel plus life plus time. I added time in there because that's a big one, is discipleship. So I'm going to ask the question of what if? What if? Now, first of all, let me tell you this. Discipleship is not an individual sport. What do I mean by that? It's not somebody discipling somebody else and that's it. That's what we think. That's what we have been taught, is there's a discipler and a disciplee, and it's an individual thing. You know what I believe? I believe discipleship is a team sport. Discipleship is a team sport. Who's on the team? Rockfish is on the team. Rockfish is on the team. Every one of you here can be a piece of discipleship in somebody else in this room if you're willing to. If you're willing to commit your time, your energy, your weaknesses, all of that, and intentionally pick other people in this room, in this church, in your life, share time with them, invest in them. What if we did that? What if Rockfish was a group that discipled people together? I think it would change us. I think it would change the DNA of who we are. Okay? I just think we need to think about discipleship differently. And when I ask that question the next time, I'd love to be able to say, hey, how many people in here are intentionally discipling others? You can think about when you brought your friend to go get some coffee and talk. You can think about when you went to basketball and afterwards started asking intentional questions of people. You can think about your small group. You can think about when you went to your parents and started talking to them. And my question to you, and I want to pray for some of you in this room, okay? I'm going to do 2 prayers, but the first prayer is, guys, if it's touched your heart that says, there's something inside of you that says, you know what? This is right. I can have an impact on others. I want to have an impact on others. I'm willing to use my life in Christ as a tool for discipleship. I'd like to pray for you. If anybody in here wants to be better, wants to intentionally start thinking about people in their life that they can disciple, that they can live life with, that they can make Christ the center of that relationship, I want you to raise your hands. I want you to raise your hands if you feel that way. I see some hands, okay? If you feel that way, where you're saying, I want to be able to do that in my life, raise your hands. I'm going to pray for you. Dear Lord, I have my hand raised because I don't feel like I do this nearly enough. Lord, I pray in this room as people are raising their hands and thinking about this, Lord, that you would in their lives use their life to disciple other people in this room, in their life, in their family. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. I have one other question. My other question is this. There are people in this room that may not have the relationship with Christ. Let me tell you this. You cannot disciple others if Christ doesn't live in you. And you may have never, ever experienced that in your life. You may have never really given your life to Christ. Like totally surrender. Totally surrender. I like to think about surrender like this. If you're in the army or a military and you're almost defeated and they're about to come in and you know you're going to die and you want to surrender and you don't want them to kill you, what you do is you go like this when they come in the room. It's an act of surrender that says, God, I can't do this anymore. I need you to do it in my life. You may have struggles in your life. You may have some things that are just sins that are in your life that you can't get over. Well, let me tell you this. The only answer to that is Christ. The only answer to that is Christ. So if there's anybody in here, anyone in here that feels that way, I want you to think about this. We're going to sing this song, okay? And I would like to, well, right now, I'd like to say, is anybody in this room feel that way? God, I give up. I give up. Okay. I can't see. So, if you feel that way, if somebody's close to you, please, one of our leaders. So we're going to sing this song. And as we do this, I just pray that God would transform our lives, make us disciplers. I pray that you would find Jesus. Thank you.